Okay, so we are at the beginning of day 4, which means our wheatgrass has done 3 full days of growth, and today is our uncovering day. So it's really the first time we're going to get to take a look to see where things are at with our different sowing rates. So while I like to be prepared, I also like to do these videos in real time so you can see things not so gracefully and not so streamlined and edited. So hopefully everything goes smooth here. But we're going to work on one tray at a time. I've pulled one tray off here. I've got it oriented so I can see the labels on this side, and I've got my map over to the right here, so I'm not mixing things up. And the first thing I'm going to do is just pull the covers off because they're done, and do an initial look at things and just see how things are overall. So let's do our first uncovering here. Okay. So the first thing I have in mind is there any disease? It's the first thing I'm thinking of, and I have on my spreadsheet here. I have a category called disease, and I'm going to give everything a 1 to 5 rating. 1 being unfavorable, 5 being favorable. So a crop with no disease is a 5, and a crop with lots of disease is a 1. Now the way I'm going to do this scale, and this is very important, is a comparative scale, which means I'm just comparing within this rep itself. So 1 and 5 are not arbitrary numbers. 1 represents the most diseased, and 5 represents the least diseased. So theoretically, in everything you do, you're always going to have a 1 and you're always going to have a 5. Now, in this case, I don't see any disease at all. Nothing here is infected. I don't see any mold, anything like that. So for everything, I'm actually just going to list it as a 5. These are actually perfectly fine. So the next thing I'm thinking about is height. And at this point, it's really hard to tell any height. Things are still at quite a low stage. And to be honest, I'm looking at each of these thinking, oh, okay, well, everything's germinated quite well. I'm not seeing huge differences in length or anything like that. Where we're going to start seeing differences is now in the sense that how things are going to grow as the roots go down and the stems try to compete. So I was hoping to do quite a bit of assessment at this point, but there's not a whole lot I can do other than just making a few notes. Now some of these, and I'll try to lift this up so you can see a little bit, some of these appear to be better than others in some ways. But we don't really have any really quantitative or qualitative data to support that. Now these ones have like some nice stems coming up the side and things like that. But that again is that could have to do with seeding density and the ability to push up around the tray. So these are not any sort of quality indicators to us. I can see on this really densely seeded one here a bunch of seeds sort of being pushed up. So it looks like some of that seed didn't germinate in there in the really heavily densely seeded one. This is 18.6 grams, which is our second highest. And then I'm guessing one of these over here, let's see here, 1, 2, 3. This is our most highly densely sowed one, right? 1, 2, this one here actually. So it's hard to tell, though I would say growth in this one looks a little not as great, and it looks like some seeds didn't germinate as well. So really hard to tell at this point, but what I will do is go through now and take an individual picture of each one of these. So the picture will have a bit of an angle, so we'll catch the number there, we'll be able to see the tray, and then we can sort of look at the picture side by side. I'll also do all these in order so we can kind of see things, and maybe when we look through the pictures I can line them all up and sort of scroll through them, and in that notice things a little differently. Here when they're all randomized it's quite difficult. So I'm going to start that now, and I'll just do this as I go. So 6.2, 7.4, let's see here, 8.7 is here. Yeah, good. Where are we? 9.9 is here. So you see, I'm just sort of going through now in order, and I have the map here, so I can easily go through and 12.4, 11.2. I can easily go through and figure them all out and put them back where they belong. So I want to keep them in their respective positions there. 12.4, 13.6, 14.9. At this point, I'm just going to turn this around. 14.9, 16.1, 17.4, 18.6, 19.8. So what I'll probably do is like this. Okay, now get this out of the way so maybe you can see here. Okay, so now I do have these aligned by seeding rate. Lowest seeding rate, increasing, increasing. And so at this point it's hard to see. You can see patterns, but it's like it's hard to tell. Like this, it's getting lighter because there's less soil exposed. Things like that are to be expected. It doesn't tell us anything about growth. So what I'll do is I'll document these, I'll take some pictures. I've done the disease rating. I can't really do a height rating, and at this point I don't think it's that valuable. So really at this point we're not seeing anything at this point that's conclusive. So it's really going to be in the growth stage where we start to see real differences. So what I'll do, I'll document the pictures here. I'll maybe make any notes as I look through things a little in a little more detail, and then I'll move on to tray number 2 to do the same thing. I'll input any notes into my into the spreadsheet there, so I've got it recorded, and then it becomes a waiting game. Then we're going to put them into the sun. We're going to keep an eye on growth, and I'll look at these daily and probably do photo documentation daily as well, so we can start to see changes, like at which point do we notice growth speeding up or slowing down for the different sowing rates, things like that. So that's stuff we can watch for. So that's it for the uncovering of the wheatgrass. I'll uncover the second one. If I see anything profoundly different, I'll record something there. Otherwise, we'll assume it's probably going to be pretty similar to this, and it's really going to be in the growth where we start to see the differences. So we've just uncovered, we've got a first initial look. Now we're going to see how things grow, and that's where I think we're going to start really seeing the differences between the different sowing rates. Okay, so I've gone through, I've taken a photo of each, and I did it in 2 photos. One to take a picture of the number, followed by a picture of the crop from above at a bit of an angle. And the only thing I'm noticing is on our most heavily seeded one, I could see a bunch of seed on the side sort of pushed up, which I've seen before. On our other, or this is our second most heavily seeded, I'm seeing that a little bit much as well on our heavily seeded one. So I think what we're seeing is perhaps a little bit of a poorer germination rate as some seeds growing, because they're too dense, are pushing other seeds up and making it hard to germinate. So I am going to give these just a quick water, which is my usual growing process. There's quite a lot of moisture in here already, so they don't need a lot. And these ones are ready to go back in production. So I'll put these up on the shelf and take a look now at tray number 2 and report back if I see anything of interest. Okay, so we've now got both of our wheatgrass reps uncovered. I've taken notes on each of the reps and each cell where there's notes to be taken. I've taken a photo of each cell, and I've given them a quick water. Now I've put them back on this shelf for now, but when I'm finished here, I'm actually going to put them into the window to get natural sunlight. That's going to be the protocol with this crop, because I don't have enough light space here for both my sunflower and my wheatgrass. And this wheatgrass will do perfectly fine with this window light here. It's south facing and does very well. A few things of note. So basically, so far the methodology I'm using is holding up well. And the one thing I was concerned about was the individual cell packs on top. One, because they were full of moist soil, there was a higher risk of disease. Didn't see any disease in there, so that's really good. And we could see that each of those individual cell packs could shift independently with the because they weren't reliant on the pushing up of the cell next to them. So that worked out quite well. Whereas if we had a single tray covering all of them, then they'd be pushing up unequally because some would have more seeds to push up than others, and that would definitely skew things. One thing to keep in mind is if you do see differences more than we see here, the question is, if you're inexperienced, how do you make a rating? And I really like to use this 1 to 5 system. It's something I've been using in some of the collaborative research projects I've done with vegetable variety trials at the University of British Columbia. And the 1 to 5 rating is really good because you're rating within your own stuff. So there's no universal 5 or universal 1. Like I said, you pick your best one and that's your 5. You pick your worst one and that's your 1. And you rate everything else based on those. So you could have like 11 5s and a 1, in essence. And because everything, there was no signs of disease or anything in here, everything did get a 5 because there was nothing, no scale. But if we did see some disease, that diseased one would be a 1, the non-diseased would be a 5, and you'd rate everything else according to that. Now, one of the questions people have is, how do I know what a good tray or cell pack looks like if I'm inexperienced? And this is a very good question. I think a better way to look at it that's really helped me is you're not looking for what you like or what you think is good. Instead, look for what you don't like, because we often don't know what we like. It's like, oh, I'm not sure what I like, but I know I don't like that, and I know I don't like that. So that's a really good place to start, is what don't you like? What doesn't have the right color? What has too much disease? What seems to not be standing upright when it should be? So use that way of thinking as one of your analytical tools. Be sure to make any notes. You know, if you're really good at this, you might really look at each tray and go like, huh, like I'm really noticing this in this cell pack. Make a note of that. Because later, you might be in conversation and somebody will mention something and you're kind of like, oh, like I recall that. And if you have no notes to go back to, you can't identify that. So here what we would do is we take notes and we take the photos. And what I will try to do is post an individual photo of each cell pack in the spreadsheet as well. So that links to that and you can see those. As I said, we'll do photos over time so we can see how the growth rate changes with each of these. And then, yeah, we'll assess this on a daily basis. Today is Thursday, May 7th. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday will be full growth days. So we will harvest this and look on Monday, whatever day that is. The next Monday is in the morning is when we're going to look at this and evaluate it at harvest time. By that point, we're already going to know a lot of good information, but we'll do our harvest, we'll do our cut then. And then we'll get a good sense of what our yield is as well. We can start recording that. So hopefully that was a helpful look at our first uncovering there. Tomorrow we're going to do our sunflower and we'll go through this process again. Might be a little more detailed with sunflower. It's a different crop, so hopefully we get to take a look at a few different aspects that we didn't get to see with the wheatgrass.